Just to say, I'll give you a brief description of IFFO because I know it's quite a varied audience here this morning. But just to say, the presentation really, although I work for IFFO, I'm presenting on behalf of IFFO. A lot of the research that's been done here was done by the University of Stirling in the UK, the Institute of Agriculture. So just on behalf of Dr. Richard Newton, Alvin Karatis, Jean Pagnon, and Julian Stevens, who actually provided a lot of the data and the information that I presented to. So I thought I would mention them at the very start. IFFO, as you see here, IFFO's been around for a great many years, and actually that actually is a reflection also of the decades-long industry that I mentioned before in using fisheries byproduct. Been around since about 1959 in various shapes and forms, various sort of different organisations, and we represent the fish meal and fish oil industry worldwide. We're actually called IFFO, the Marine Ingredients Organisation, and that is a rebranding that occurred 7 or 8 years ago to bring into, under our wing potentially, the new marine ingredients industries such as microalgae, seaweed farming, like as well as they come in over time. We have roughly representation of about 50 countries in IFFO. We represent about 60% of world production of fish meal and about 80% of the traded volume of fish meal and fish oil worldwide. So we've got a good coverage. We engage with a lot of important international bodies like the UN, the FAO, International Maritime Organization and the like. Just 3 points about what we're about: committed to transparent supply chains, marine ingredients mean quality feed, and marine ingredients help feed a growing population. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in the context of aquaculture. Why they're so important? Fish meal and fish oil. You're talking about essential nutrients for the fish. On the fish oil side, you've got essential fatty acids. They're called essential because the species require them from a nutritional perspective. Like salmon, not least the omega-3s, the EPA and the DHA. They're really important for salmon health. The salmon only gets them from its diet, you can't get them anywhere else. And on the fish meal side, as well as being very high in protein, fish meal is usually 68 to 72% protein, highly digestible. It has a very good amino acid profile, including a lot of the essential amino acids, which are very, very important for fish nutrition as well. And a whole range of other micronutrients too, vitamins and minerals, which you don't see in other feed ingredients. So when you come across dialogue, media, journalism, which suggests that fish meal can be replaced by other proteins, that is generally factually inaccurate. There is a lot of nutrition which comes through fish meal and fish oil which actually cannot be directly replaced. So they remain practically essential nutrients in aqua feeds. Just going a little bit more into the detail of what the research project was about. IFFO was known for many years. The byproduct has been a significant volume of the raw material which goes into fish meal and fish oil supply. But what IFFO was finding it difficult to get a handle on, certainly 10 or 15 years ago, was actually the volume of that raw material. And IFFO has some strength in providing statistical reports on fish meal and fish oil production and consumption on an annual basis. IFFO's been doing that for many decades. And we draw very heavily on the FAO databases. So the idea of this work was to take forward the information that's provided by the FAO and provide a bit of a further analysis. Okay, so the analysis was really, it was a desk study that was performed by the University of Stirling. The idea was really to look at the top 20 species of production by volume across 9 different regions, and the amount of processed product and the quantity of byproduct that was available. And then looking at that quantity and what was directed to fish meal and fish oil over time too. The idea was really to get a difference between what the current usage is, what's available and what's being used by an industry, and actually what is not being used. So there's certainly an amount of material which is used in fisheries, which is a result of the processing, which is not going to fish meal and fish oil production and is being lost to the system. So that was an idea to actually get a handle on what that sort of volume was. Also, the idea that EPA and DHA is finite. We have roughly about 5 million tons of fish meal produced every year, just under 1 million tons of fish oil. Within that fish oil, you've got an amount of EPA and DHA, which is about 200,000 tons per annum. The idea was to look at where there could be more material that might supply an increased amount of EPA and DHA, because that is a constraint on at least salmon farming, increasing production over time. This slide is really just a reminder for me just to say what I said before, which is equally, although we're talking about byproduct here, and byproduct's important, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of whole fish which go into fish meal and fish oil production too, which do not have a food market. And they're used in the production of these high quality fish meal and fish oil, which then become aqua feed, and which then are used to produce protein which people do eat. And that's an essential part as well. And it's something that we in IFFO have a lot of work to do to defend the reputation of the industry on too. But there are very, very good reasons why whole fish goes into fish meal and fish oil production as well. Briefly, I'll show you some numbers a little bit later on, but certainly briefly, this work, which reported in 2016 and really drew on data up to about 2014, so it's a few years ago now, estimated that about 33%, so about a third of that raw material which produced fish meal and fish oil was coming from byproduct. So very significant quantity. The figure that IFFO had produced, I think in 2012, Jonathan Shepherd, who you may know, who's the Director General of IFFO at the time, had estimated about 25%. The trend is increasing. The FAO had quoted a figure, I think for 2030, with an estimate of about 49% raw material from byproduct for fish meal and fish oil. So it's definitely an upwards trend, so it's good news from that point of view. There's also a regional split in terms of how the study was conducted, and again I'll show you the table a little bit later on. It shows how those regions actually, the difference in whole fish and byproduct use per region. Europe actually comes out quite well, and the estimates for Europe were about 54%, mostly from wild capture. There's another point here as well, which is that aquaculture byproduct is also a part here. And an interesting point is, yes, raw material availability has been finite in the past, but actually as aquaculture grows over time and there's an increased volume from aquaculture development, there will be more byproduct material resulting from aquaculture, which is growing at, what, 4%, 5% per annum, something like that too. Asia and China show the most potential for gains in fish meal and fish oil from underutilized resources. There are actually cultural differences here as well in how the material is used. Certainly at the time of the study, and I know it's changing now with the growth of the middle classes in Asia, but at the time of the study, the markets in Asia, certainly in many instances, still deal with live fish. So buying live fish in the market, taking them home, then consuming them, obviously a lot of that byproduct is then lost. So at that time, this is going to be a reflection of another change over time in that as the middle classes grow in Asia, there's going to be more centralized processing of seafood, and that byproduct will be easier to collect and actually then use as a raw material for production. This gives you an overview really of the figures, and it gives you an idea of what we've already got. This is raw material supply in thousands of tons going into fish meal production. Now, that 5 million tons of fish meal, 1 million tons of fish oil, about 60%, maybe a bit more, goes into aquaculture. It also goes into pig, poultry production, pet food as well. So it's not just fish farming, but fish is a very efficient way of actually using this material and producing protein. But this gives you an idea of that split between whole fish, byproduct from wild capture, byproduct from aquaculture as well, and the total raw material used. So that 5 million tons comes from approximately 12 million tons of raw material. Gives you a percentage split. Over time, there you see Europe at the top, 54%, Asia at 44% as well in there, China, and various differences. Oceania comes out quite high, but the volume's low. And the reason it comes out high is tuna byproduct is often used for fish meal, fish oil production in Oceania, and easy to collect because again you've got centralized processing. Okay, so the potential sources of additional raw material, and again this is highly theoretical in nature, but it did draw on the FAO's data set. So there's some numbers behind this, and these are the numbers that the FAO reported as well. And Richard Newton, when he did this analysis, he looked at yield figures for the various different species, those 20 top species in the different regions, looked at the publicized yield figures and then calculated the amount of material which in theory should be present and what should be left as well. That figure showed that instead of 20 million tons being available for fish meal and fish oil production, I think the top line figure was there should be 33 million tons. So there's certainly a marked increase in the available material, and it's not being collected. And it's for various reasons, and I guess most of the reasons are practical, or logistical. Fish meal plant is expensive by nature, and they're few and far between, so you certainly need to get the raw material to the fish meal plant to actually have the production underway as well. So that logistical issue is something which is highly significant for the industry. There are ways the industry is dealing with this, and not least in the pelagic fisheries, and that we're seeing fish meal plant now on fishing vessels, which is a great step forward. And that sort of integration of the fish meal industry with the pelagic industry is really helping to use that material and also produce a very high quality product as well, which is based on very fresh raw material supply. It's worth saying and passing as well that there are other potential raw material sources too, not least krill, which is a very underdeveloped fishery around the world. There are potential other invertebrates, and I've put starfish up there. I guess that might be a surprise, but actually what I can say is that in the EU register of feed materials, starfish were included about 2 years ago, so certainly the European Commission has recognised some of these other materials as well that might be coming through in the fullness of time. It's about using the natural resources as best you can, and equally mesopelagic species as well. There's probably a lot to learn about some of these other stocks of fish as well, with all the caveats, of course, that the stock needs to be effectively managed. There needs to be good controls in there. There needs to be a good data on that stock as well. With all those caveats too, there are other materials out there. All this material is supporting aquaculture growth and very important over time. And if you looked at salmon farming, 1990s, I guess a lot of people know this, but certainly 1990s, salmon feed was about 90% marine source materials. Now you're talking about 10% or less fish meal in there, and maybe about 10% fish oil as well. And so there's been a replacement over time. And that has had to happen because of the fact that the salmon industry is growing, and you cannot stretch that 5 million tons that's being produced over time. So it's a success story from the feed companies really, and how they've used these materials and combined them with other materials and actually had a resulting fish feed. The thing, this was Julian Stevens that worked with Richard Newton. He looked at a case study in his master's project where he looked at Scottish salmon farming and produced some very, very interesting information about salmon production and the yield, and then also where the product ends up. So quite fascinating, really. One of the things I would say is that from a fish meal perspective, the EU regulations prohibit feeding same species to same species, so certainly salmon meal couldn't be used in an aqua feed for feeding salmon from that point of view, but again it's a resource that can be used elsewhere as well. And Julian's starting point was really to look at the yield from the different aspects of farmed salmon. As you see, a very fat farmed Scottish salmon there, very good condition factor. But it gives you an idea of the percentages that you have in there. And so there's a lot of material, about 10% frames, 10% heads, viscera guts in there, trimmings, belly flats, and not least, of course, blood. There's a lot of additional material there which can also be used. This is also important from the point of view of, I think a lot of people hear about fish in, fish out ratios. And again, it's something that not just the fish meal industry, but also the aquaculture industry are criticised by people who don't understand the nutritional aspect of this. But actually, if you looked at it from a fish out perspective, there's a lot of additional material in there which can also be used, also has high value. It's not just the amount of that fish that's actually eaten as fillets and what goes onto the plate. There's other material. What Julian had produced was, I don't know, this is going to be really difficult to read. It's difficult for me, really, and I'm quite close to it. But he looked at where the estimated byproducts, reported byproducts were used, and the methods of utilization. So he looked at the volume which went into domestic consumption, what goes into export market. It's really interesting that, I know you pictured the cod head earlier. salmon heads from Scottish farm salmon frequently exported to Asia. So they're going east and they're eaten there. We have some of the trimmings as well, which go directly into pet food, so they're not processed. But then we also have the material which is processed and which goes into fish meal and fish oil production, and also the hydrolysates as well, which produces very high quality protein as well, which can be used for, well, potentially for human nutrition in the future, but certainly in feed as well, and very customized, very important feeds like a marine finfish hatchery diet, something like that, something very high value, and also into other areas as well, like fuel and fertilizer too. So this is the breakdown that Julian had done. So very, very comprehensive breakdown of what's available over time. This comes from a published paper. It really gives a very good overview and a highly theoretical, really a desk study this is, but you know, it gives a good idea of what's available, what other byproducts are out there and how they can be used over time. But it's also worth saying, and I know that this is going to be touched on other times over the next couple of days, but there are other special compounds that are available in this material, like peptides, like chitin, like chondroitin. There are skin products, and interestingly, with the other plant-based feed ingredients, what you get with soya-based feed ingredients, what you get with wheat-based feed ingredients is they often lack minerals, and these are essential minerals as well for animal nutrition, and actually from a bone-rich meal, which tends to be what a byproduct meal is, there could be a lot of value in the phosphorus and other minerals which is present in that fish meal as well. So I think there's more to come on that too, and really realizing that true value of that.